So it's not all about what you've physically learned, because as I said, half the stuff I've learned about maybe earthquakes or volcanoes or microfossils are not something I use every day. Hi, I'm Clare Barber and I'm a Geotechnical and Geo-Environmental Engineer. So as a Geotechnical and Geo-Environmental Engineer, I work in engineering consultancy to support structures and civil engineering. So when someone wants to build a new development, whether it's a house, a bridge or a road, for example, then we provide the assessment of the ground conditions, both from a building perspective to support the development, but also a contaminated land perspective. So I originally studied earth sciences at university, which is essentially geology, and my dad was a structural engineer, so I was aware of the role of geotechnical engineering. And although I'd studied earth sciences more with an interest in paleontology and that side of things, Fairhurst came to our university and talked through different career options, which opened my eyes a bit more to the type of varied work that you get in engineering. So I started working as soon as I graduated in that role. I have moved around since, but they, among other consultancies and other disciplines, so the oil industry, for example, would send companies like Shell, and they would come to university and try and get graduates at that point. So there was a lot of career opportunities straight out of university then. So they would come and explain what their career is, and if you were interested, you could go and interview. So yeah, I went straight, before I even graduated, went straight to work there. I mean, previous to engineering, I worked through university, as most people tend to need to do. And at that point, it wasn't engineering specific, so I worked for a bank in an internet help desk, and I worked as a lifeguard for a while. Interestingly, I would say that the banking probably has helped quite a lot, because essentially working on an internet banking help desk, it was mostly complaints and people who were struggling with maybe logging on, so were very frustrated. So I feel like I learned quite a lot about customer service at that point, which once you get into any business, I think customer service is important. So it did help, even though it wasn't related. And then while at university, I did an internship with a mining company who actually subsequently got bought out by the company I now work for. But they look specifically at coal mining under developments, which there's a lot of in Scotland and Northern England. So that really helped, again, put the degree into context as well. So we'd learned how to read and draw geological maps at university. That job was then interpreting geological maps to see what the risks might be to a new development. So looking at coal mining workings and working out if they'll pose a risk to new buildings and whatnot. So it was helpful. It was something that I did on my own, but it was more because my dad had worked with that company before and knew I was interested. So it wasn't a requirement of the university, and they didn't set it up, but it definitely helped to get industry experience. And a lot of universities and courses now do put you through industry experience for that reason, I think. Or you might find that what you wanted to do wasn't, it gives you a different route. Maybe you think actually that's more interesting than what I thought it was going to be, which is what sort of happened to me. I hadn't gone to university with a view to becoming a geotechnical engineer. It developed through learning the industry from what I knew from relatives that job, and then companies coming in and talking to us, so it wasn't the idea at the start. I would say it's changed from when I started through to now. At the start of my career, a typical day would generally comprise doing a lot of site work, so going onto site, looking at soil and rock and logging those things, sampling, working on construction sites or sites that are to become construction sites in the future. I did a lot of mineral, so coal working stabilisation, so on site watching contractors and making sure they're following the specifications that we designed. As my career's progressed, it becomes more about managing those projects and the team members who then go out and do that work. And so a typical day usually now involves working on maybe 4 or 5 different sites and managing what stage they're all at, and that can be reporting on findings from a ground investigation, it can be going to meetings to speak to client, it can be going out to win work with clients, speaking to local authorities for planning, regulators for groundwater contamination. So it's very varied on a day-to-day basis. It never gets boring. Yeah, never gets boring. And I think that's the main advantage of the job, is actually each development's different, each area is different, and each project always has different constraints and issues. And then working with structures, civils, architects, mechanical and engineering services, you get to work with a huge range of people, all from different perspectives of the development, and that's really interesting as well. Yeah, every day there's something new that I didn't know before, so that keeps it interesting. Yes, the job is very much problem solving, so it's looking at a site, thinking about what problems might arise in terms of developing it. And it's satisfying to take it from that stage through to actually seeing the building going up. And working in consultancy, you do tend to see it from initial pre-purchase of a site, for example, through to the building opening, because you've got your structural engineering colleagues and whatnot. So in some companies, if they're limited to one thing, then you might find that you just have one element of work to do and then you don't see this project again. But working in a multidisciplinary company, you generally get to see things from start to finish. So it's satisfying to know that you've investigated problems and overcome them with your engineering solutions. And what's interesting is every day, because those problems might be different, you have to develop a new solution or learn a new solution that you weren't aware of before, which keeps it interesting. On the flip side, the challenging part is having to learn new solutions each time. I think what's interesting and difficult is the industry does proceed quite quickly. So there's new technologies, new engineering solutions all the time, and it's not just what you learned, and in fact, to a degree, it's not what you learned at university, it's what's coming out month after month, and there's new ways of dealing with things, new problems arising, groundwater levels are changing, and maybe planning changes, so what used to be okay for a development now isn't, and all those adjustments mean that you need to adjust, and that can be quite challenging because you need to be on top of your game and on top of keeping up with research, and therefore meeting deadlines and client expectations when maybe the goalposts are moving can be quite a difficult thing to do, but also to communicate to people. So industry publications are a good way. There are lots of bodies like the Association of Geotechnical Engineering or the ICE, the Institute of Civil Engineers, British Standards, Eurocodes, all of these things do research and publications do come out. The thing is you do need to just actively go and find them, and that usually comes through in the job work. So if you've hit a problem and you're not sure how to address it, then going and finding that information is how you learn And so it's not sitting studying every night, it's usually I've got a problem, I'll go and find the solution, and with each new project you're therefore expanding your knowledge base that way. As part of engineering and a part of a lot of the memberships and associations, you do need to have what's called continual professional development, and you need to register that. So there's an element of that at home in your own time, but there's also a lot of it on the job learning, as we call it, and all of that is registered to if you're working towards chartership and these kinds of things. So it's twofold. It helps on the projects, but it also helps develop you as an engineer. Yeah, so I've done my environmental engineering chartership. I also did a additional master's degree at the same time as working, so I did a part-time online degree, which has been really helpful. As I said, I studied earth sciences, so I subsequently did a civil engineering master's so that I could pool the two together. Earth sciences is a wide discipline. It covered everything from volcanoes to groundwater, so not everything's that applicable in engineering. We don't worry too much about volcanoes here or earthquakes, but doing the civil engineering then helped tie the two elements together. So I definitely think that the CPD part of it, the continual professional development, is a great help if you want to continue to learn and continue to progress in the career. Yeah, for geotechnical and environmental engineering, you would need a Bachelor of Science degree in either earth sciences, engineering, or maybe environmental sciences. And that would be a minimum requirement. After that, there is actually not a requirement. A master's does often help. It maybe sets you apart from other candidates maybe, and it does help in the job, but it's not a requirement to get into the position in the first place. Thereafter, like I said, the continual professional development is one. Most companies put you on a training process where you make sure you get a lot of in-house training. You do a lot of out-of-house courses. You might do extra degrees or courses or that kind of thing. A good starting point is to look at, engineering covers all, like a huge variety. Even geotechnical engineering has a huge variety in it. You could work for a ground investigation contractor, a building contractor, a house builder. There's so many options open to you that actually spending a bit of time early in your career getting those different opportunities so that you can decide what actually suits you best, but also it helps further down the line if you've got an understanding of all of these elements. So opening yourself up to options and opportunities and looking what's out there is probably the best thing to do first. Some people want to be on site 100% of the time, and there's great jobs to do that in, particularly in ground investigation contracting or, as I said, house building. Some people don't want to be outside most of the time, and there's lots of other design options where you might undertake occasional site visits, but predominantly are working on design and data processing. So I would say learn the industry and see what's available. And from there, you can really map out your own interests and work with those. I would say there's a lot of opportunities for summer placements. So if you are at university or studying at college, then a lot of companies will happily take you on. And I've worked in a lot of places where that's happened, and the people that come in usually end up coming back for a job as well. So, you know, if it suited them and they've suited the company, then it's worked out really well, because actually they get an insight to what they're going to be doing, and it means that they then actually see this is really for me. And when they come out of university, they've got a job waiting because the company know them too. So it's a good opportunity to do that, yeah. Well, at school I had no idea what I was going to do. I think I was like most teenagers and just thought the school was something that you had to go and do. So I wouldn't say I was the most academic. I didn't do a lot of, I did fine in my what are called hires and standard grades in Scotland. But you know, I was never top of the class. I think I've always been interested in the science elements, so maths, physics and all those sorts of things. But I think having a good balance between working but also the social aspects has stayed with me the whole time, and I think work-life balance is an important one. So being able to communicate with people, clients and everything else has probably come from being quite a sociable person at school. Yeah, so a lot of geotechnical engineering is interpreting. So you're given a set of data or information or a site map or even just a photograph of a site, and you need to start interpreting, much like in maybe forensic analysis. You need to start thinking about what the evidence is showing you, and from there paint a picture of what problems there might be, and from there what solutions there might be. So I think having an analytical brain is important, being able to see issues before they arise and then how you're going to address them. But also communicating with people. As a geotechnical engineer, even in the company you'll work for, you'll talk to people who aren't geotechnical engineers and don't know exactly what you're talking about. So being able to put it into layman's terms so that they understand what the risks are and they understand why the solutions are required is another important part of it. I think again, communication from a perspective as well of bringing business in, talking to councillors, MPs, talking to site owners. Someone who just wants to put an extension on their house probably won't want to hear for an hour about the geology of their garden, but will want to know what you're going to do to help them. So knowing your audience and being able to tell them what they need to know. It is very wide. So in the company I work for just now, we work on rail infrastructure, housing, leisure, so hotels, hospitals, schools, housing. So you might have a homeowner, you might have a developer, you might have a council. So that's first of all the clients. The clients vary hugely, but then there's all the other members of the project team when working on a site. So architects, the actual contractors who build the developments, structural engineers, civil engineers, transport engineers. There's a number of people involved in actually putting a construction site together, and each one of those have their own requirements. So geotechnical engineering might want one thing, whereas a landscape architect might want something completely different. So all working as one project team is a huge part of engineering, and that's a big part of the day-to-day activity is attending design team meetings and talking around a table with various different people with various different backgrounds about how to take something forward with solutions that suit everyone. So the clients, massive range, and then their employed staff from us to the architects is also a huge range as well. Every design team meeting you go to, there might be new technology, even in things that maybe really aren't that relevant to your job, but for example, changes in energy supply to residential flats. There might be a change coming from sort of central heating, gas powered, to electricity powered heating, and that's set about due to changes in climate change targets. So those sorts of things that are decided at government level suddenly start to have an impact on sites that you're sitting, and you wouldn't necessarily learn about these changes. You wouldn't know about, say, affordable housing, how much a client has to put in or doesn't put in, parking targets, emissions targets, wind studies for high-rise flats. There's elements of engineering that each day you learn something new on, and it does help make you a more rounded engineer, but it's also interesting. Well, the prospects are really, again, very varied. You can, if you want to, you can start your career working in one element and stay there doing that same thing for years. And some people do like that. They like to know their career and keep there. It makes them comfortable to know what they're doing. There's prospects to change. So I started as what might be described as an engineering geologist, so looking at predominantly rock and rock cuttings and wind farms and that kind of development. I then switched over to mining, and then I switched over again to housing, and then I've switched again to sort of multidisciplinary work. So there's the option to change career path within geotechnical engineering quite easily. And then in terms of prospects from a more positional point of view, things like managerial positions start to open up, client development, so business development, or the financial aspects, so project management and looking at program budgets. All of these paths are open, and it depends on your capabilities and your interests on whether you want to go down those routes. But I came down to England 4 years ago in an office that was already open, but the London office where I now work didn't have a geotechnical and environmental team. So one of the opportunities that came to me was to start that team. And so for the last 2 years, as much as the technical elements I've been developing a team and employing people and strategizing how to increase that workload. So that again is a whole new element of work that isn't anything to do with the earth sciences I did at university, but is developing my understanding of the business and the prospects going forward. So if they find they're more a managerial person, they can go down that route. If they find they're more interested in, say, project management, they can go down that route as well. I think it's important to realise that what you do at university isn't the be-all and end-all, and that the methods of learning, the skills that you learn at university are just as important as the technical knowledge that you gain. So it's not all about what you've physically learned, because, as I said, half the stuff I've learned about maybe earthquakes or volcanoes or microfossils are not something I use every day, but the skills that I developed at university in terms of problem solving, reporting, are things that you use every day. So, and experience. So if anyone can do it, I think if I'd known at the time, I might have done more work experience specific to the career I was going into, because that's a big part of the learning on the job, is just learning the different elements, and you can start that as soon as you're at university. You don't have to wait till you're in the career to do it. I don't know if every career has the opportunity to do internships and summer placements, but if they do exist, I think speak to 90% of people, what they learned at uni is not what they do every day. Other than maybe doctors and surgeons, and most people, it's more about how you learned rather than what you learned, and applying that as you go forward. Yeah, and I think the other thing is that there are so many careers that nobody knows about. I didn't know anything about geotechnical engineering specifically. I mean, as I said, my dad put me in the interest of engineering, but I didn't know there was a role for geotechnical engineering. I didn't know there was environmental contaminated land engineers. I didn't know half the people that I speak to at design team meetings and their specific roles. I would never have known at school that those opportunities are there. So I think researching based on what you are good at and what you're interested in, don't be surprised if there's a lot more open than what you thought might be the case. A lot of people think, oh, I like geography, so I'll become a geography teacher, or that there's that limited scope around different subjects. But actually there's jobs in all sectors that you would never even know about.